Hi everyone! Welcome to the third video in my Procreate tutorial series. This week I'm going over some of the different ways in which I've colored my illustrations in Procreate. If you haven't already checked them out, I recommend taking a look at my previous videos in this tutorial series. The first one is getting started on Procreate, and I'll put the link somewhere up here in the top left. And my second video, Sketching and Lineart in Procreate, and the link will be somewhere up here in the top right. I also wanted to say that this is in no way affiliated with Procreate, and I am by no means an expert. I'm just a self-taught artist who started illustrating with Procreate back in 2020, and over the past couple of years I've experimented with several different ways to color an illustration, and I wanted to share them with you. I'm also sorry if you can hear some of our cats grumbling and growling in the background. I'm sharing my office chair right now with Minui, and Marius wanted in on the chair also, so he's kind of lying down on top of her, and she does not like that. So if you hear growling, it's Minui. Anyway, where was I? Sorry. I also wanted to say that there's really no right or wrong way to color or create your artwork. So if you like these methods I use of coloring, then great. And if you don't, then that's cool too. You just do you. Alrighty, so here we go. So when I first started drawing in Procreate, I used to just color as if it were a coloring book. I have my line art layer here, as you can see. Then I create a coloring layer underneath that and kind of just color in the lines like so. So I have my line art layer, I'm going to add another layer here, and I'm going to move it below my line art layer. I'm going to rename that flat color because this is no shading, there's no lighting, it's just the base colors. You can name it whatever you want, really. All right. So this is Spam Musubi. I'm not going to color the whole thing, but just to show you, I'll color the nori part here, and that's kind of a dark greenish black. I don't want to make it too black because then you won't be able to see what I'm doing, so I'll just use a dark green for now. And for this, I don't usually have, because it's like a coloring book, so it's kind of like freestyle, and I don't want the streamline to be at max, I want it to be at 0, just personal preference. So now I'm coloring on the flat color below the line art. That means if I color outside, you can kind of hopefully see that it's underneath the line art, it's not on top of the line art. So what I would do is just color in the lines like so. Make it a little bit smaller for the corners here so I don't go outside of the lines. And so that's the first method of coloring that I used when I first started. After a while of doing it this way, I switched up and started using the color drop method. So let me clear this. All right, so you have the same layer set up as method 1, but instead of coloring everything in, you can outline what you're coloring and then color drop the rest of it in. So again, same setup. Instead, we're going to outline this. It doesn't even have to be pretty. You can just color like so, all around the perimeter of where you're trying to have the color go. And then the color drop method, what you do is you look at your color wheel here, you hold it, oops, that's not what I wanted to do. I held it too long and it goes to the previous color. This will be, I guess, a good time to show you the color picker. If you hold down on a color, this pops up and it lets you pick that color. So if I wanted green, so I held down the green. If I want white, it chooses white. If I want black, it chooses black. So just by pressing and holding. Okay, so what you want to do is drag this here and then lift. And that's how you color drop. One thing to be aware of with this method is your threshold percentage. So let me undo that. So if you pay attention up here, there will be a bar that pops up. So let me drag. So this is your threshold percentage. Right now it's at 97.6. That means that it's doing a pretty good job of filling everything in. If you go to 100, you'll notice that it fills it goes outside of where you want it to. Okay, in order to show that, you drag and you drop and you keep your pencil down. Don't lift your pencil up. And then you'll be able to drag to the left to drop the threshold percentage, or drag to your right to increase the threshold percentage. So usually when you want full coverage, you would go as far to 100 as possible, but without going to 100. Because if you go to 100, it'll color outside the lines. Now, if you were to drag it all the way, you'll see in certain areas there's some white spots left. That's because your threshold percentage was lower, so it didn't color all the areas. So let's undo that again. And that's also depending on your brush that you're using. The color drop can sort of leave gaps like that, even more so. A hard brush that I'm using has pretty good coverage, but if I were to, guys, please behave, okay? Let me clear this and let me use a different brush. If I were to use Spectra, that's a paintbrush that I use pretty often. See, let me turn off the stabilization, turn that down to none. Okay, so if I color in the lines like this, make it a little bit smaller. Okay, so you see it's already, the coverage isn't as solid as with the hard airbrush. So it really depends on what brush you're using. So if I were to keep going just to show you, just to demonstrate the color drop. Okay. See, like this. So, I mean, and it's no problem. You can color over it depending on the style you're going for. Oh, sorry, cat hair. So that's just something to be aware of. The type of brush you're using is also important. But yeah, so that's the color drop method. Oops, just clear that. The third method I started to use when coloring, it got super tedious real fast. And instead of using methods 1 or 2, I started using the selection tool. So I'd have my, let me turn that off. I'd have my line art on one layer, like so. Then I'd create a second layer for coloring, just as with the previous methods. And I would then take the selection tool and outline a part of my line art that I wanted to color, like this. So we're gonna do the same thing, just outlining the naughty part. And as you can see, I'm on freehand, and I have the add icon selected. So it's gonna add this selection. Okay, now I've selected just this. Then I'd save that selection. You click save and load down here, and the add button saves that selection for you. And then you can use the color fill option, which is down here. So if you click here, color fill, it fills in what you've selected. And we're on the flat color layer, so that's where it put that. The selection tool's color fill option negates the color drop issues I mentioned previously, like with all the white gaps and spaces left over that didn't get filled. But like I said, I found this to be super tedious to have to go and outline your selection. And then sometimes I'd forget, like I'd outline it and then I'd forget to save it. So then if I wanted to go back to that spot and only that spot, I'd have to outline it again. And with something like kind of cute and simple like this, it's not that big of a deal. But with like a portrait, especially like hair strands and hair segments, it got really tiresome. So I'm glad that this method is now behind me. So the next method, let's go ahead and clear that. Okay, so after doing that method for longer than I'd like to admit, I found a way around the tedious part of using the freestyle selection tool and instead started using the automated selection tool. However, with this method, you're putting the line art and the coloring on the same layer. So let me delete this flat color layer. So now I'm on the line art layer. So you color drop into the selection of your line art that you want to color. So I'm going to color drop this. The threshold is pretty low, and that's why you see those that white outline. So I'm going to drag the threshold all the way up to almost 100. I ran out of space, so let me do it again. Okay. And in this case, 100 does not go over the lines because you're actually on the same layer as the line art, so you can't go past it when the line's this solid. Okay, so now you've color dropped into the selection that you wanted to color, and then you go to the selection tool, and this time you're clicking on, make sure this color fill is unchecked. Now you're clicking on automatic selection. Whereas before we were using freehand to outline it, now we want to select the color, so we're going to automatic, and then we're going to click on the color, but because the colors are pretty similar, like it's a dark green and a black, it'll highlight everything. And this also has the same type of threshold mechanism. So let me undo. I'm going to click on it again, drag it down. Let's start at 0. Undo the selection. So click, and you see how it's only now that the threshold percentage is at 0, it's now only selecting the green color. Now if I drag the threshold percentage up a bit, you kind of see the selection encroaching on the line, and now it has the majority of the line. So you want to back out of it to the left a little bit. And then once you've saved your once you've selected what you want, then you can save that also. See? And now if I wanted to color on top of that, just for show and tell, now it's just that's selected. It's not the line art, even though I'm still on the same layer as my line art. Okay, so I can't clear that, right? Because it's on the same layer, it would end up clearing my line art. So I'm just going to undo several times until the color goes away. The fifth method is my most recent coloring method and my favorite so far. It's kind of a nice and easy combination of the previous methods. You set your line art to reference. So you click on this, then you click on reference. Now I'm going to add a layer, drag it underneath. All right, now setting it up this way with your line art above the flat color and your line art set to reference, it allows you to color drop on your coloring layer even though your lines are on a different layer, and you don't have to outline it or anything. Ta-da! I think this is the method I use most often, but it also depends on what style I'm trying to accomplish, and I also might switch it up at different stages within a single illustration. For instance, I might use this method as a base color layer. I might also add another layer on top of that where I freestyle paint with a different brush and color if I want my brush strokes to be visible as details within the illustration. And to do that, I click on the layer, let's just rename this as details. Okay, now I renamed it, I'm gonna click on it again, and I'm gonna select clipping mask. Now this layer is clipped on top of and to my flat color layer. That means that whatever I draw, let's just pick a lighter green like we did before. Whatever I draw will only color on what's on the layer below it, whatever layer it's clipped to. So, see? Because it's only clipped to this layer, it's only going to paint on top of that layer. So I use that to add like different brush strokes on top of my base colors a lot. Yeah. So let's delete that. Let's clear, well, actually we'll leave this here because the next thing I want to show you is how to color your line art if that's something you want to do. So for instance, what I usually do is now let me color in the spam. Let me just color drop in some spam color. Okay. So now I have some of my flat colors and I have my line art. I like to save the line art as a hidden copy. And I move that towards the bottom just because whatever's hidden and whatever I'm not using right now, or whatever I don't think I need further, instead of deleting it right now, I just move it to the bottom. And I like to keep it's basically a backup copy in case I don't like what I'm doing with this line art. But in order to color just the line art, you click on that and you select alpha lock, and that makes it so that you can only draw on the line art. You can only draw on what is already here. So for instance, I'm going to make my line art a little bit darker. Now I can color. Oh, I'm still on Spectra. Let me go back to hard airbrush. Now I can color my lines. See? I'm not being super perfect here. What you can do is like zoom in, make your brush smaller so that you can kind of line things up a little bit better, but anyway, you kind of get the idea. See? And you're coloring the line art, and let's make this a little bit darker just as an example. I mean, it's pretty close to black, so anyway. And then you keep coloring. So yeah, that's how you do the line art. That's basically it. This seemed like a lot more content in my head, and I thought this was going to be a much longer video. I hope it was clear. I hope it was helpful. Please let me know in the comments. And thank you all for watching, and I hope you found these coloring techniques helpful. And next week, I'll be going over how I add my shading and my lighting to illustrations. So be sure to tune in if that's something you're interested in learning. Thanks everybody. Have a great rest of the weekend and a great week, and I'll see you later. Bye!